talking about other resources, just so you know, on Westminster's website, we did put together a discussion and study guide to be used with this book as well. That you don't have to. The book could appear somewhat intimidating, being nearly 600 pages long. Um, One of the things that we did was we wanted this to be used in an approachable way that you can use in one-on-one discipleship or small group settings. And so I'm actually involved with a small group at my church, and we're planning on using this book at some point in the future. And so what I did was I put together a discussion guide with that in mind. So the study guide is designed for church usage to understand. Okay, even as each chapter is roughly 20 or 30 pages, which could be a bit overwhelming. Yet at the same time, the way in which Bavinck breaks it up is each chapter has 6 or 7 different sections. Usually each section is no more than 2 or 3 pages. And I could promise you each little section, it could take you a couple days just to stew on it and think about it, to contemplate the wonderful works of God. This is not something to be sped read through. This is something to sit there and just meditate on. And I think pedagogically, he builds off of it, little by little, in such a way that, again, use the discussion guide as a way to work through the difficulties. He introduces a lot of concepts, a lot of new terms that should not be something to scare us. I think it's a classic scholastic attempt to bring clarity to a situation. And I think that's exactly what he does, is he doesn't introduce new terms to confuse you, but rather to help, turn the lights on. And I think if you use, and the study guide's available for free on WTS Books' website,
wonderful.
as a PDF, and use that and use it as something to discuss with other people. You can read it by yourself, but I think it's good to actually say, okay, what does he mean by this? What does he mean by that? And use this as a way to be drawn into further fellowship with one another. Because this is really
Yeah.
something, I remember when back in the summer of 2013, when I did my internship, it was me and a couple other guys. This other guy, Robert McClure, Carlton, I'm sure you remember him. He was one of our interns from Northern Ireland. And it was so funny because some of our roundtable readings would just be us going, hey, here, let's read this paragraph. And then somebody would read the paragraph and everybody would just sit there in silence and go, that was wonderful. Yeah, there's really nothing else to say. I remember one of my favorite quotes, if Carlton can quote, then so can I. Which is actually pretty funny because the very first quote that Carlton gave was one that I was planning on reading anyway, the one on the Trinity and the Confession. But here's another, and it's under the Covenant of Grace. This is page 253. This is one of my favorite quotes from Bavinck of all time. Speaking of Adam's rebellion, it says, by his transgression, man has departed from obedience to God, has left his fellowship, and has sought out the friendship of Satan, and has entered into contract with him. But now God comes in his grace to break up this covenantal relationship between men and Satan, and put enmity there instead of the friendship that had been concluded between them. By an almighty deed of his gracious will, God brings the seed of the woman, which the woman had surrendered to Satan, back to his own side. He adds to this the promise that the seed of the woman, despite many kinds of adversity and oppression, will nevertheless sometime gain the total victory over the seed of the serpent. Nothing conditional and uncertain about this. God himself comes to man. He himself plants the enmity. He initiates the warfare, and he promises the victory. Man has no part in this except to listen to it and accept it in childlike faith, promise in faith, the content of the covenant of grace, which is now set up for man, which disclosed the way to the Father's house to this fallen and straying creature, and which gives access to the eternal salvation. It's one of the things that Bavinck talks about elsewhere when he summarizes the whole content of special revelation in the Old Testament. It always points to two main things: the sending of the Son and the outpouring of the Spirit. And for me, that really just helped me get a lockdown on understanding the Old Testament. For people who grow up in a Baptistic or dispensationalist tradition where you feel like you have to have all these, end time charts that wrap around, mansions to understand everything that the prophets say, where the prophets feel like this gigantic black hole. Bavinck cuts through the Gordian knot in 2 sentences and says, no, the whole Old Testament speaks to the dual mission of the Son and the Spirit, and then unpacks what he means by that in a way that's just so clear and so helpful, and makes you realize, no, 1 Peter 1:10 really is right, that the whole Old Testament is intended to, it's the Spirit of Christ speaking of the person and work of Christ, and something that we now enjoy in
Amen.
much more.